Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video, first of all, is thank everybody who's doing the work, the personal development work, whatever that means for you. If you're doing that and I'm following you, I'm benefiting from you. Okay. Even if we had a past that we didn't get along, like I'm still benefiting from that. So conflict can be just as useful as commendation. Somebody kissing your ass, right? Somebody attacking you in your life can be just as poignant as somebody kissing your ass, right? Although we prefer to have our ass kissed and we prefer to have good things come our way. Sometimes if you have too much good coming your way, it makes you weak, right? Careful of that one. Like if you have too much money around, you get lazy and you get soft, right? Because there's something to be said for like a real necessity. If there's no real necessity there, are you really going to care about something? No, you're going to put it off. You're going to be inclined to want to put it off. So sometimes being like poor and hungry is exactly what you need if you want to perform in some kind of a medium. I don't care what kind of artistry it is. But sometimes, though, your performance in an area of artistry benefits from being at peace, right? And allowing, I call this light intuition versus heavy intuition. So we'll talk about this in this video, but let me just go through. I'm going to be a little bit chaotic here. I'm trying to balance chaos with order. I'm trying to show that like being too ordered is anal, right? But being too chaotic is the opposite of anal. So there's anal retentive, which is being too orderly, and then there's anal reflexive, where you're not orderly enough. I mean, Sigmund Freud understood this, right? This is some crazy kind of, not crazy though, too. Keep in mind that we all operate on our own comfort as finite perspectives. Fundamentally, we protect our own comfort. I want to talk about balancing light versus heavy insights. I chose those words a little bit delicately this morning when I did a little bit of prep for this video, just a little bit. And I was thinking to myself, well, if I say light insights, is that going to mean masculine? Is that going to mean feminine? I don't know, actually. I don't think it has to fit that. But light insights are insights that come in the present moment, that come through openness. So light insights are all about emptying your cup and allowing the light insights to come in because you're not doubled down. See, this is what comedians understand in a way. Comedians really understand light insights. Heavy insights are, you already have some kind of idea what you want. You already have some kind of idea what you believe. You already have some idea of what you want to do. And you're just trying to like perfect that. It's like the difference between off the cuff, like this video, right? I'm trying to be entirely off the cuff. So I'm trying to embody light insights in this video, in that sense. Heavy insights are like you're trying to make a point, right? You're trying to bring something to a point. You're trying to serve some kind of goal. You're trying to support a conclusion. You're trying to perfect something that you've already created, even if it's a spiritual system. Those are heavy insights. And actually, I guess, the theme of this video is probably like how to balance light insights with heavy insights. And this is something that if you're not ridiculously intuitive or ridiculously open, you're probably never going to get this, right? Because you're so heavy, right? You're like, you need everything to be deep. You need everything to be like not grounded in the now, but grounded in the mind. See? So there's a delicate marriage between the mind and feeling, right? Which we might consider intuition to be a species of feeling. And here's a question too, like, can we put our feelings into words? What are the pros and cons of mind with a capital M? We see this in Western philosophy too, right? We know mind is important sometimes because reason, if we, we might recognize that something is bad for us, right? Like a relation. We have some kind of a relation and we're like, okay, this relation, I can't do this anymore. I got to quit, whether it's like a person, in the case of breaking up with a person, or maybe it's, your relationship to watching TV or following some kind of online internet, species of communication. We often kind of wonder too, sometimes too, like, should I quit this? Should I quit this relationship? And realize too that when you quit that relationship, it's like breaking up with somebody too, right? But see, if you're really conscious, you realize that you can never really break up with anything. Like your past, you cannot break up with your past. As much as you want to on the spiritual path, you cannot break up with your past entirely. Don't try to push stuff into your shadow that way. And you almost want to get to the point, I think, where at some point on the path where you let the light insights carry the edge. So, I have a lot of ideas about stages on the spiral that go beyond turquoise, and I've made videos on those. And sometimes I feel like I'm like a lawyer trying to like defend those. This is what I thought prior, right? This is what I want to do moving forward. But then I realize too sometimes, man, those are heavy insights. It's like somebody who's developed a repertoire of music and they're trying to perfect their music, their songs. Those are your children, right? You're bought into that. But the problem with that, those aren't light insights. Those are, in a way, kind of dead insights. Those are insights that happened a long time ago, and you're retaining them, and you're trying to develop them, and you're trying to preserve them as a finite perspective. And this is where, like, having a full cup can prevent you from having an empty cup. See? To be receptive to light insights, you need to be open. And the way almost like a comedian is open, not like a ridiculously calculated comedian, but somebody who's just open to allowing humorous insights to occur. There's somebody who's really in the present moment. You have to be really in the present moment. Like if you're like really caught up in concepts all the time, like even if you do psychedelics and everything you do has to like fit these like this narrative or these concepts that you have, be careful of that one. But I want to say too, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater regarding that. Like I have my own feelings and ideas feelings versus and ideas, or feelings slash ideas and not even, about personal development, about truth, about God, about mind. These are my personal carryovers almost. But then when you think about it, what is being carried over other than in the present moment? Like you're keeping this full cup. See, this is the importance of Zen, is understanding how, yes, you are perpetuating a narrative. Reality is not a hallucination, but yes, you're perpetuating a narrative. The reason why you're perpetuating a narrative is because you're clinging to a thought story about reality, right? Sort of deep intuition. Like somebody in philosophy trying to become Beethoven. We're like, I'm going to create philosophy and I'm going to hold on to it. Like you're doing music, but in philosophy. Like I'm going to create my 9 symphonies in philosophy, and then I'm going to assume that those never change, right? Because that serves you. But I'm going to argue, and I'm trying to be like very compassionate about this too. I don't want to be rude about it or anything like that, because I understand, every system needs to survive. It's amazing what kind of a backstory you will tell to preserve your narrative. And the thing is, when you have a narrative, and this is something I'm reflecting on myself, like I'm looking at my own stuff now, like, am I just like carrying this? Or are these insights still applicable? Because I had the insights at some point. I made videos on those. And then it's always the question, when you're consciously creating, it's always a question of like when to throw something away versus when to keep developing something. But it's also contextual. Like, we're not talking about music here. We're talking about philosophy. We're talking about spirituality. So you have to understand that, like, just because you create like some beautiful spirituality doesn't mean that that is the spirituality for some other person, right? That just might be a model for them. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not, I don't think spirituality is directly transferable. I mean, I guess, let me pose this as a question so it's not like seen as didactic. Is spirituality directly transferable? Is there a stopping point in personal development? Like, what? Like, okay, so you do a bunch of psychedelics. I've done a bunch of psychedelics too, right? I've been on this path for a long time. But is there a distinction between your experiences and then what you have to say about those experiences? How do we know that what you have to say about those experiences are good for me? I've done the same psychedelics. So it's almost like you have to trust, right? Which is, it's not entirely a postmodern issue. We need to be careful that we're not strawmanning postmodernism or postmodernity. Postmodernism isn't entirely stage green, just so you know. And there are different postmodern philosophers. So postmodernity is a class. It's not a direct reference. And then I kind of wondered too, like, am I stage blue, like regarding humility, or stage green? do I have a kind of shadow problem with like orange and red puffery or puffing or domination? And I think I do. I think I honestly do. I do have a problem with assholes. It's like, people have different like love languages and hate languages. So every perspective, when you get into perspective, you'll see people have different personality types. They have different love language, different hate language. There are different things that will trigger different perspectives. And this idea that you're going to get to a context-independent perspective is already precarious. I mean, you've already recognized that solipsism is a problem, right? In other words, like, how can you come to me, like, what's the weight of your judgment with respect to mine? It's like somebody coming into your house, you're your guest. Do you let your guest decide how your life should run? See, and I'm even conscious enough to realize that my perspective is also a guest. That's a deeper level when you realize that your finite perspective is also a guest in the house. And you're able to get to a higher perspective where you realize that the absolute is not your finite perspective. Okay, friends, so just give me 1 second. I'll come back and we'll do the second half of this video. All right, friends, welcome back. So let me clear that up if I didn't screw that up. So basically what I want to say is that from the absolute perspective, your perspective is a guest. Your perspective is also a guest. See, a lot of people don't get this. They think that, like, I have the one right truth, and if just everybody else just agreed with me, then things would be great, right? That's not the case, because even when you do psychedelics, there's no narrative. Yes, there are insights that come to you when you're doing psychedelics, but there's nothing that tells you, there's no Moses that comes down from the mountain when you do 5-MeO-DMT and tells you that this is the one right truth. And think about this. There's nothing that says the psychedelic experience is superior to any other kind of experience. If you really believed in consciousness, you would not hierarchize psychedelics over any other kind of consciousness. You realize that consciousness is always here, even in the sleep. You're sleeping, maybe you're doing something, whatever it is that you're doing, consciousness is always here. So why would the psychedelic experience be any more important than any other experience? It wouldn't be, right? But you're prioritizing that. And I will say this, I will agree with you that it's very challenging how to balance light insights versus heavy insights. And I said this, like, going back to the past, and I mean, it's not always true, but I always feel like, not heavily, but lead with the light insights over the heavy insights. Let the light insights carry the edge. So for example, let's say that you have some kind of knowledge about when trains are running, right? And you're reliant on that versus sticking your ear to the track. So sometimes your theory, your conceptual mentality, it runs you off the rails. It screws you up. Like sometimes you really do. It's like when you're playing chess, you have to sort of look at the facts on the ground about what's happening. You can't just rely on your openings knowledge about what to do, because the other side is not going to do that. See, you're way lost in concepts. You can have incomplete information. And then you just double down. And maybe this is because you value truth, right? See, I try to value personal development over truth. But I understand there are going to be people out there that value truth and they're just going to do this, right? They're going to take every experience and try to like boil it down to some kind of ideology that they consider to be the absolute truth, and they're going to be stubborn about that. They're going to have a full cup instead of balancing an empty cup with a full cup. They don't even know what it's like to have an empty cup. Think about this. I got this language from Leo's forum, actualize.org, but somebody made a great post that said, the horror of not knowing anything. The horror of not knowing anything. See, you can't handle that if you value truth. You're biased because of your values. So it's not like you don't have the highest perspective, you just have your perspective. The higher perspective would be that there's something beyond your finite perspective. So I think, again, the problem here is not sort of like recognizing your own developmental issues. And wanting to stay away from relationships because relationships are about dealing with people's developmental issues. When you relate with people, there's a risk that somebody's going to say that you're false, that you're a devil, that you're irrational. Well, that shows why you value truth, God, and mind. Because you don't want to feel false, like a devil, and irrational. You want to project those onto the other. Or you want to say that they're false. And it's not that you're wrong, it's just that you're limited, right? And you know what? Like, I feel humble, like saying this, like I'm not trying to be mean about this, but from my perspective, it's like somebody who just wants to feel comfortable in life. They want to feel like they're right, everybody else is wrong. But it's like, do you need that? Why do you need that? You don't need that for your own security, do you? Your own self-esteem at this point? Like, here's a question for you. Could you go on being totally of the mind that we don't know anything? Would you still be able to survive living that kind of life? My argument is that you would. It may change some aspects of your survival, of course. And I also think, too, that like understanding where somebody is coming from is very important. So see, people who are limited, they don't realize their own limitations. That's why they're limited. By definition almost, and I'm sounding pedantic here, but I mean, think about this. Somebody who's higher consciousness can see your limitations and you can't. But the question is, like, who's higher consciousness or not? That's a question. And I would argue, like, if you really did have a sense of spiritual enlightenment or even spirituality, you would like simultaneously have a kind of arrogance and humility about your relation to any other person. It's not about solipsism or community of gods. It's about both and neither. See? It's about feeling like you're okay to be here. I think that's what the essence of spirituality is. and also dealing with finite perspectives, including your own, and the love and hate shit that happens there, and trying to have an order that sits up over chaos, but then a chaos that sits up over order too, so that you're balancing having some kind of a repertoire as a creator with being open, having an empty cup and being open to new insights and open to personal growth beyond what you think is the limit, right? You've defined a limit, a limiting belief in spirituality, though. It's like you spent all this time trying to create the one right philosophy about reality, instead of realizing that that's exactly the problem of modernity, right? But then you say, well, no, it's different because it has to do with these things that Western philosophers didn't talk about, but Indian philosophers did, right? Chinese philosophers did. Some Western philosophers did too. So I don't think we should strawman postmodernism as being stage green. I think there's more to it than that. I want to say this too, that relationships that failed likely failed for a reason. But I feel like the idea that a relationship failed should be accepted on some level from a finite perspective. But from an infinite perspective, if you can see yourself as a finite perspective, then you don't take it as personally, because you realize we just have different values. People are arrogant about stuff that they really shouldn't be arrogant about. People are too humble about stuff that they shouldn't be too humble about. So there is this issue of like the absolute versus the relative, and how to balance those. But also, like, stop trying to be perfect. I know you need to be perfect to be the teacher that you want to be. And there's an issue between how much control we have over our finite perspective, and also how we relate with our finite perspective. So, and then creating a nuance around the finite and the infinite so that they interplay. And realize that when we're speaking, or when we're allowing the universe to speak through us. So sometimes it's not always, possible to make this distinction. I'm not even sure this distinction always applies. I think there's an issue of truth versus magic too. Like, these are commonly used to make our finite perspective the infinite perspective in relation to the other. And then I also think that there's like living with it. So there's a difference between, like, this video. I have some notes in this video for sure, but what I tried not to do in this video is I tried not to support any of my developmental theories. And I just tried to riff off of, in a way, some notes that I had. But I want to allow the light intuition to carry as opposed to the heavy intuitions. So again, light intuitions are when you're opening yourself up and you're allowing the insights to move through you. Heavy intuition is when you're supporting prior intuitions that you've already had. like trying to shore up something to create a philosophy. Right. So, all right, friends. Hopefully this was a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.